Hello everyone, and welcome to The Man Behind the Curtain. I'm Randy Young, the guy in the red shoes, and I've been in the video production business my entire career, and it's taken me around the world a few times. But more importantly, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most creative people in television, and boy do they have stories to tell about the business and the people who make it happen. We've always been told, ignore the man behind the curtain, but you can talk to me.
Okay. Bill Bunkers. He's a producer, he was an executive, he ran several major production companies. His resume oozes with confidence and experience. And in his retirement, he's become a consultant. And he also plays the drums. So let's have a chat and see what Bill's up to. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Randy. Thank you for that introduction.
My pleasure. How are you? How you been?
I'm good. It's been interesting not being in day-to-day agency life for the last 6 years now.
Sure.
It's been pretty great.
Okay. Let me start with the first couple of little warm-up questions.
Sure.
Just first response, what comes to your mind? Ice cream, chocolate or vanilla?
Oh, chocolate.
You're a Chicagoan, Cubs or White Sox?
Cardinals. I grew up in St. Louis.
That's right.
So I piss everybody off.
Very good. What is one thing that you're very passionate about that doesn't involve work?
Do it has to be just one? My grandson, my family, and I love music.
There you go. Good. You're a big reader, fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction.
Okay. And what's your favorite word in the spur of the moment?
Oh, shit.
Okay, excellent. All right, now, I want to talk a little bit about your history. Give me the short course of Bill Bunkers, where it started and how it got here.
I was a radio kid in college. I went to University of Missouri, St. Louis, trying to figure out what to do. I was really passionate about music, and at the time, one of my classmates, who's been my wife for 45 years, was working at the NPR station on campus. There was a 100,000 watt National Public Radio affiliate, and they gave the students access to it on the graveyard shifts over weekends. So she was the music director, but I had all this geeky, goofy music knowledge of who played on what album the second time versus the third album, and I got kind of roped in, and I found a passion. And it allowed me to learn how to produce. I did a lot of location recording. I came up with programming ideas, and it was just a really great experience. College was great from the academic standpoint, but I kind of learned everything from doing and working in radio. And so I got out of college, worked in radio, worked at a public TV station for a while, ended up here in Chicago for grad school at Northwestern. And right as I was making a change from a master's program to a Master of Fine Arts, I got contacted by a woman, a close friend who I had worked with in radio. Her husband was a tech director at what was Bush Creative Services, an agency that Anheuser-Busch started. It had since been sold to a couple of the leaders, and it's now Switch Agency, still in St. Louis. And she's like, call John, there are jobs. And I talked to him and figured out I could study producing, I could do producing. So I went down for an interview, and I got hired. And I figured out something with my advisor to finish up the master's long distance. And September of '82, I started as like an associate producer at Bush Creative. And there about 3 years, and went from associate producer to the last thing I produced or was involved with. I managed a $5 million budget. I don't think I would have given a 28-year-old that much money to play with. I know I didn't when I was a manager, but it was a great experience. And the inmates kind of ran the asylum, and we got to do a lot of pretty wild stuff.
We're going to get to inmates and asylums pretty soon.
Yeah.
But that sounds fascinating. I want to step back to when I went freelance in 1987. Mm-hmm. You're one of the first guys I contacted.
Yeah.
And I was going through all my old papers the other day.
Crap.
And I found invoice from TAP Productions number 103, dated October 20th, 1987, for consulting services on a McDonald's proposal.
Oh, yeah.
Behind that is the next big job we did.
Oh, for I was thinking the first time you and I worked together was the Baxter Show.
Yeah.
And, you know, the interesting thing, I mean, you were part of Creative Establishment.
Right.
Which was an agency that when I was at Anheuser-Busch, I was a Creative Establishment client. Mm-hmm. We subbed some work out that we didn't have the capacity to do, and I met Dave Amling, I met Joan, Mara, Rich Anderson, you know, kind of a cast of characters that I didn't realize the role they'd play in my life for later on when Creative Establishment went away.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild. Then you know, Creative Establishment
I
went
had to
away.
bring these up because you were the first client I had as a freelancer.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. I didn't realize that.
I had to see they're a little bit yellow these days.
Yeah. Well, good for you for keeping all the paper. I think I've probably done a little housekeeping, and my archives are not museum ready.
No, I've kept most of the paper. Now it's all electronic. But anyway, enough of that. Your consulting business, now that you're retired, we're going to get to talk about that, but what led you to that through the agency world?
I came to a point as, you know, I turned 60, as some people get to do, and I just thought, okay, what do I want to do with my time now? And I wasn't as passionate about the work because I was more in a management role, and I thought, okay, someone needs to be doing what I had been doing, who was really passionate about it and really was, you know, wanting to move their career forward, as opposed to, I've seen this movie how many times, I'm doing yet version, you know, episode or encore number 16 of Porky's or something. And it kind of just felt like it was time to make a change, and I was leaning towards executive coaching, because one of the things I realized as my agency career was coming to a close, what I still really enjoyed doing was working with people one-on-one. I liked being able to help people grow and develop, and the consulting part came as a result of a dear friend and now partner, Bill Boris Schachter, who I'd worked with 30 plus years ago at Jack Morton. When he left Morton, he started Tonic Consulting as a way to use his 30 plus years of wacky experience in the agency. And as I was telling him about wanting to go and do executive coaching and maybe some consulting, he just said, you know, we could do this together. And Bill had a partner at the time, and we set up a call a week later. In the span of that week, his partner decided that she wanted to return back to agency life. And so we were kind of ships in the night. One left, I came on, and we've been doing this for 6 years.
Wow. I didn't realize it'd been 6 years.
Yeah.
And you specialize in smaller companies and even some independent contractors, as I understand.
Yeah, the focus is creative agencies. It started as creative event agencies because that's where both of our expertise is, but it's kind of broadened out just because we've had some relationships, we've had some introductions, and in some respects, whether it's a branding agency or a digital agency or even a tech services company, there are a lot of similarities. And the thing that's been, for me, that's been really great about this is, you know, again, it gives me the opportunity to use this weird experience that no one still understands what this business is. And we can come in as, you know, we like to say we're inside outsiders. We're inside the business. You don't need to teach us the industry, but we're not inside your company, so we can provide perspective. And we've had a couple folks say, you know, I've hired coaches and consultants before, and they had no idea what I did. So we're just really fast studies, and we can be extra staff or advisors or thinking partners.
And then you also bring that experience of managing producers, and then your experience in management of the other disciplines required in those businesses. Is that a big value to them, your experience there?
I sure like to think so, Randy. What has been, I think it has been, at least I've been told it has been, and between Bill and I, Bill is got a lot of really deep financial knowledge because he ended his career at Jack on kind of the internal operations with contracts and P&Ls and pricing. And so he can really help an agency owner or a leader understand the story behind the numbers and how behavior change could relate to or result in a different outcome. And on my end, I've had some of that as a general manager. I've had the operations side, like Bill also was head of production at a Morton office. And I did kind of HR people stuff in my last few years at AJ. And I did a lot of recruiting. So having kind of been a Swiss Army knife in a way around all the things that happen in an agency, I think has been valuable because I've seen things that an agency owner might just be experiencing for the first time.
Bring that same answer, but talk to me about managing the crazy world of creatives, producers and writers, and those who think different. Perhaps don't have the what you might want in terms of the financial backing or the business backing, but are more creative.
Most of the folks we end up working with on the consulting side are people who are accidental business people. They were a creative director. They were a producer. They had an account. They were an account director. And then all of a sudden, they've got a P&L to figure out, or they have to figure out how to let somebody go that they've never had. Or they've got now staff reporting to them that they've never had staff reporting to them. And some of it is a little bit of agency 101, trying to help them put a framework together and some discipline that makes sense for them. And for me, that's part of where the executive coaching stuff comes. I can put everything on paper that's really clear and here are the steps, but if somebody is maybe they're feeling like an imposter or they're afraid of something, we can kind of get inside that and unpack it and figure out how to help them move forward.
How does that help their business? What does that do for them?
I think it makes them stronger leaders. I think it helps them understand decisions they have to make. And at some level, what we have been able to do is, somebody will tell us, well, here are the goals we want. Yeah, but your behavior doesn't support those goals. And be an accountability coach in a manner of speaking and help them, follow through on what they say they want to do because they've got somebody to answer to. And I think one of the challenges for the privately held independent company is whoever the owner is the stopping point, as opposed to, Jack Morton's owned by a huge agency conglomerate. They report earnings to Wall Street, and if the earnings aren't great, they've got to make change. For the privately held company, who's holding the owner accountable and helping them really focus on what they say they want to, where they want to go with the business? And so we're able to be that accountability coach, wall, voice.
You can hold the mirror up to them.
Pain in the ass, as the case might be.
Wow. So let's step back into your management of the production companies and experience with Morton, August Jackson, and Proactive. In those days, I think there was a lot more client loyalty than there is today. Do you hear client loyalty issues as trouble points for these clients of yours?
I don't know if I think yes and no. The yes is procurement now plays such a big factor in the relationship that the loyalty might be there at, who's the real buyer, the head of marketing, the head of communications. They love the team they get to work with. They go out to dinner. They've got, a really great shorthand. And then from internal process, every X number of years, somebody has to bid it, just like they're bidding any of the other services. And so that comes into play. And the challenge that I've seen both on, in my agency life and working with other agency owners is often procurement is not aligned with the goals of marketing. Marketing's not aligned with the goals of procurement. And so there's a lot of tension, and the procurement doesn't really understand the value the agency or production companies bringing to their corporation. And the marketing group doesn't want to let go of the agency because they don't want to have to train somebody new, and they think they've got a really great system going. So if there was a way to get both of them on the same page, I think it'd be great. And maybe it happens in some select companies, but I don't see it as often. But
is that your responsibility to train them how to teach their client that? Is that what you try to impart across to them? Because what you're talking about is their clients' inner communication not jiving. How does the production company work into that framework?
There have been situations where I've suggested in my past life that procurement come on site. And there was one show I know you were directing where we had procurement come on site specifically because we knew there was going to be a bid. And they didn't, in our conversation, they didn't really understand what we did or how we did or where value was. They were looking at what's the cost of a projector? What's the cost of a backup system? Why is the day rate X versus something else? Not understanding kind of the technology and creative ecosystem that supports their client and being aligned with marketing goals and trying to help the client, the corporation, move an audience to a particular place that gets them enthusiastic and engaged and they all hit their sales numbers. A guy was looking at screen cost and projector cost.
Looking at a spreadsheet.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. So we brought the person down, or suggested they came down, gave, the tour, they saw the program. I think it might have helped. We still had to bid because that was the process. Sure. But, there's only so much you can do to facilitate, two parties that are either just not aligned, at war with each other, or only talk to each other when there's a bid that pops up every 3 or 4 years.
Right, and that's all an internal part on their end.
Yeah,
not,
I think there are things you can suggest, and there are, I think for an agency, there's constantly a striving of how to demonstrate we're adding value or that we are valuable. And I think on a relationship standpoint, I feel most companies are really good at it. From a bigger picture, I think they're challenged with it because I think this business, it grew out of theater, grew out of creative, and the people that have been drawn to it didn't come out of MBA marketing programs looking at measurement and KPIs. And there's a little bit of the marketing discipline that I think if applied to our business, and it has been, particularly in the customer-facing events, what are some metrics around it? What are some goals that we can come back and say, hey, the audience believed X at the start of this, at the end of this event, we're able to move them closer to your goal, and look at it that way as opposed to, well, yeah, it was a good meeting and people were smiling with cocktails at the pool. Who doesn't smile with a cocktail at the pool?
Sure.
But looking at it from the value we provide in helping build their brands from within the organization and get a motivated sales force or a leadership group and have them believing, and that's hugely valuable for a company trying to, hit their goals for the year or launch a new product. You've got an engaged team. And I think, for me, one of the things that I'm biased. I think what we do is far more than put on a show or do creative work. I really do believe we're helping companies build their brands from within the organization. Mm-hmm. And the first thing in a marketing playbook should be align the sales channel. Make sure the sales folks know why you're doing X. Get their support, get their buy-in, because they're often the brand at the moment of truth with their customers. And can they live that brand and represent it passionately when it comes time for a customer to make a buying decision?
So you're talking about gathering that data post-show. post an event.
Well,
But you have to run the surveys. You have to do the research there.
And one of the things I saw when I was at Proactive, the guy who was the owner, Tony Lorenz, was trying to find ways to demonstrate meeting value. And one of your old colleagues, you may remember from Creative Establishment, Ira Kearns.
Sure.
Ira had left the event business and started a measurement company, a survey company. And Ira had developed a methodology, a survey product that measured audience perceptions and beliefs ahead of the event, and then you'd come back and measure it after. So instead of just doing the post-event survey with, okay, how was it? You knew where they were coming into the event. We'd use that data to help figure out, okay, what's the messaging? What should the creative be? Where is there trust or not trust in the organization? And help tailor the content to address issues that the audience had. And then at the end, we would do the post survey, and you'd see kind of what you'd see what the needle was. I mean, we actually had one situation where we were doing a dealer meeting for a big manufacturer, and only 17% of their dealer owners understood the company's sales strategy, which is kind of bad if that's your sales channel. You sell through dealers.
Yeah.
So it completely changed the nature of the meeting, changed the content, changed who was going to be on stage. And at the end of the meeting, when we did the survey, 97% understood it. So in that case, it's like, here's your investment, here's why you had the meeting, here's the result from the meeting, and you've got a tangible value that the production company, that the creative agency has brought to you. It's not just, hey, the speeches were nice, we had good cocktails, we think they were energized.
And you can see those results right away, which is rare. Normally you don't see it until the next quarter or the next half year or the next annual report when you see the sales numbers change. And then how do you relate that back to last February?
Yeah, and see, one of the things I think that's changed in this, for me at least in the business, is the idea, when I got into it, was what creative things can we do? And I think this change from production company, we're producing the thing, to agency, and I still don't have a good definition of, okay, so what does an agency mean? But I think one part of it is, providing a level of leadership and insight to the client that they don't have. And I think in our business, in corporate events, there's not a lot of time spent trying to understand where the audience enters into the conversation and where their head is, and is there trust? And what are the issues they have in the marketplace? And a lot of times the audience and the corporate client are ships in the night. They may be saying the same words and using the same language, but it has different meanings. And so I really feel, from my experience working at Proactive, for the agencies to really develop and create a lot of value is being that audience interpreter, being able to ask questions that I'm not going to, give that answer to corporate. As a neutral third party, being able to gather that info, understand where the audience is, and develop creative in response to that makes it more effective, and is a place where I don't see a lot of agencies playing that could really give them, to your initial question around loyalty, kind of a place where it's really hard to move them out of that relationship because they have knowledge in a process that somebody else isn't going to have. They become the owners and interpreters of that audience, and that audience is incredibly valuable for our clients.
So you're talking about post-show analysis. Isn't there a pre-show analysis, and you touched on it a little bit, that you need to go through, and you need to establish what the message wants to be? Is your sales force aligned with the message? Is the corporation aligned with the message? Are your creatives aligned with the message?
Yeah.
As a manager, as a runner of the company, as an executive within the production company, how do you manage when those things aren't together? And when the client says, no, we want to do this, your creatives say, no, we want to do this. Who says no, who says yes?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, this is the challenge. I think in any consultative business, we have answers, and it's ultimately at the end of the day our client's choice to listen or not. And so there's not a lot you can do other than feel, okay, I did my best. I operated with integrity. If I was in my client's shoes, would I want that kind of information, that kind of solution? Sure. But there's only so much getting in and changing somebody's mind that's possible because we don't have all the information. We don't know what politics might be going on internally. I just have this funny memory of a meeting I was involved in years ago, and we did all this audience analysis. It was great, and we had a really important for the company meeting, and 3 weeks later the company got sold. We had no idea that was going to happen. So there's parts where we don't have all the understanding, but you give it your best shot. Right. And I think the key is operating from a place of leadership. We're pros in this. We know how it should be. Mm-hmm. We should be able to lead and guide our clients, because a lot of times we're working with people who've, all of a sudden they're in the position and that they own the meeting. They've never done a meeting. They've been in the audience. They've got an opinion, but they haven't had to run it. And so I would always ask, when I was producing a question of my direct client, what's going to keep you awake at night? What are you really worried about? Mm-hmm. It could be going over budget. I had one client say that they were really concerned about their presenters being organized by the time they got to the show and not running over time. So, okay, week and a half out, we rented a hotel ballroom, had them all come in and deliver their presentations to management. And there were two guys that had 250 frames of a PowerPoint for a 15-minute talk. Time out. We got some big editing. But that answered a big pain point for the client. And it's like, okay, you can pull some individual things out that that ultimately then create trust and help them, make it a much better event.
So trust is a key factor.
It's a huge factor. I mean, this is, why do people work with each other? It's okay, there's talent, but it's trust. It's, you and I have a shorthand. You know what my version of good looks like. I know what your version of good looks like. There's an accountant who does a lot of, or at least historically, done a lot of tax work for people in the industry. And I was getting my taxes done one year, and somebody before me from another agency had just left, and somebody after me from another agency. It's like, you guys are really cliquey. And it's like, I don't know if I'd say that, but you have to understand, we get one chance to do a really great job for a client. So if somebody asks us for a recommendation, we're going to give them somebody we think's going to deliver. And that recommendation, our word has some weight, and we're not going to do it lightly. No. So the trust of, I get folks calling, I'm looking for an EP, or do you know a creative director? Mm-hmm. I'm going to give them names of people that I love, that I light up with. I light up when I get to work with them.
Right. You're not going to give them the bad guy on the block.
No. Hopefully I don't know that person.
Right. Let's hope so. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, and you brought it up without prompting, I might add, the word passion. Okay. This business. Almost everyone that I've talked to doing this series of interviews has called their career a passion. When you were line producing, when you started, when you moved up through the ranks, did you do it because it was a passion, or was it just a job?
Oh, I was getting responsibility I didn't dream I was going to get. My first 3 years at Bush was traveling a lot. That was all new to me. I was seeing, celebrities and seeing big productions, getting tickets to shows because we wanted to use a lighting vendor that Genesis used. All sorts of stuff that I wouldn't have had entree to. I felt like I was a kid in a candy shop. I got to lead a team. I got to coach and develop folks. I got to meet other suppliers and partners that become lifelong friends. Got to kind of change how things got done, and it was really great.
we've got a few years of experience in this business,
At least.
between the two of us. What's changed?
More of the budget over the years has gone to project management because there's more involvement in, I'm going to say managing our clients, but helping our clients, helping the corporate clients figure out how to do stuff and almost becoming surrogate staff for the amount of time we're producing the meeting. When I started, we knew the process was going to be hard and it would often suck, and the clients and the agency would be crabby with each other. As long as the show was great at the end, we'll see you next year. And somewhere along the line, the process became part of the product. And if you can mesh with the clients and be seamless and be easy to work with and provide leadership, you're back. If the process is troubling, who cares how great the work is? Somebody's not going to want to work with you again.
Well, that relates back to what you're talking about consulting your clients with, and the backroom knowledge that they know that they need to share, and how their departments get along with the others, and your advice that you give to them then directly relates to how they interact with the agency.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's changed, not for the better, is a lack of, I'll call it customer intimacy. And by that, access to senior leadership to understand what goals are, why they're having the meeting, what's important to the meeting, what does success look like. And a lot of times in the last several years of my agency life and then as a consultant, I see agencies getting requests for bid that are very logistics or tactical oriented without what's the strategy for the meeting, what's the state of the audience, what's the state of your business. And creative, we can come up with ideas, but the best ideas are ones that make sense for the company right at that moment in time that a year from now you're not going to use because the company's moved on. They're not appropriate. So having that knowledge is really critical, and it's just harder to get to. People are busier. Procurement comes into play, and they can be a really great partner or not. And so I think it's harder for the agencies to really do a great job on their clients' behalf.
It's a tough it's a tough row to hoe there, and trying to figure out all of those change and touch points. So when you speak to the client and you talk about the pre-production work and the post-production work and the analysis afterwards, you're right, there's a lot more involvement than there ever used to be. And that process takes time and it's longer. How do they compensate for that time? Do you advise them on that as well?
Hopefully they will. Yeah.
And are the companies buying those softer costs?
It's hit or miss. I'd say 50% of the time, at least in my experience, I've seen clients kind of understand the communications ecosystem, that the event is, 5 days in Vegas, but we need to talk to that audience for another 360 days and then lead up to the next event. So I've seen companies have very thoughtful, very strategically planned communication programs that go year round. I've seen companies just say, well, we might need a couple videos. Great, we'll do a couple videos. And then I've seen, we'll see you next year, or maybe we'll see you next year, and it's done. But it feels like at least half are looking kind of a little bigger picture. And maybe that might be conservative. It might be more than that.
Is that harder to sell by these people now?
I think it's, for a lot of agencies, that's where a lot of the value gets created. You think about it, you've just done a national sales meeting, you've learned about the company's business, you've shown you can be a good partner, a good steward of their financial resources, and they've got a communication they need to do. You now don't have to teach these folks. They may have assets from the meeting they can use. They've met all the marketing team, they can move faster. So it's like you've made an investment by hiring them to do the meeting. And if they're capable, you can really capitalize on that by looking at them year round. And that's, for the last 20 plus years of my career, that was one of the things as we look for new clients. Who do we think has a need for us to be there almost every day?
Right.
And maybe that's an extreme.
I don't think it's an extreme. And I thought, and I have thought for years, why isn't the live events business and the corporate communications companies, why don't they work more like these big advertising agencies, where they're signing long-term retainer agreements? These one-off jobs just don't, there's no margin in it, and there's no future.
It's hard, and one of the things that I saw, compared to an ad buy, there are a lot of different owners for the meetings within a company. They're not under one budget or one umbrella. So to do that, you got to convince the 6 event owners who may all have their favorites and people they love working with, and then whoever owns the communications who may have favorites that they like to work with. So it's a harder sell. And I saw it a couple times work, but best is, can you get into like a particular division and be that division's go-to group? It's harder to get the 4 divisions. All sorts of different personalities, and they're also in competition with each other in some way or another. So
yeah, I just looked at it because I did a lot of work for advertising agencies in my career, and they seem to be able to do it, and I just was amazed that the event people never really launched into that concept.
I think it gets down to where the budget is in the company, and does the company consolidate the spend? And in consolidation, do they look to have a partner or a couple select partners?
So where's the business going?
I don't know, Randy. Let's come back in 5 years and see where it's been.
Oh, come on, get your crystal ball.
No, here's the thing that I struggle with now in some level. On the creative side, no offense to video, but everything's screens. And there's a point where there's screens everywhere. I mean, we can go to the United Center, we can go to concerts, we can go to museums, and this might be the old man bias, but coming up in multi-image, that didn't exist except in some museums, maybe at Epcot and corporate. So you came into an event, into a corporate meeting, and you saw something that you didn't see elsewhere for the most part. So I think it's harder to develop creative that really stands out. We're a media saturated society. The corporate clients, it seems, are a little less risk tolerant, and so it's a little more conservative. And how do we create work that stands out in the moment for that client? I think that's a big challenge. So you think about a meeting, you're bringing 1,500 or however many people together, and are there ways besides sitting in a ballroom that you can create community? And some of that might be a logistics challenge. You get to a hotel, they've got ballrooms. And so where do you stage the events, but trying to create something that's more high touch in an environment now where everything is more high tech. We're on more Zoom calls, a lot of texting, but you create the community and the connection. And sometimes, it may be a little agenda change. Maybe there's less ballroom time, and there's, more one-on-one or small group or interest group kinds of things. But I'd like to see some shift, so it's not 1,500 people that are in a dark room for 2 or 3 hours and can really, the companies can really harness the power of that audience.
So if you get invited back to your alma mater, Northwestern, to speak to the graduates, what are you going to tell them? Is this a good business to get into?
I think this is a really good business. Now, I say that knowing it's a hard business, but I think every business has difficulty and challenges. But for me, the thing that's been interesting is I've gotten to work with really talented, passionate, good people. These little nomadic tribes that form are really special. And it's really great. You go on site and you see somebody you haven't seen for 3 or 4 years, and you pick up like yesterday and off to the races. Get to work with passionate people. I've gotten to see a lot of the country and some of the world in somebody else's budget. might be the inside of a ballroom for a while and only step outside occasionally. But that beats sitting at my desk, 365 days a year. You get some variety. And I think if you're a curious person, there's a lot to be learned. All these little client meetings and involvement with the executives of a company, it's like little miniature grad school classes. You hear things at meetings that, oh, that's why that's the case, or that's how that industry's run. And for me, it's, I didn't pay attention to business at all until I got into this wacky industry, and I probably skipped more econ classes than I attended. And all of a sudden I'm seeing how sales forces work. I'm understanding the marketing function. I'm seeing similarities between beer and tractors and pharmaceuticals and consulting. I'm seeing the differences. I'm seeing really great leadership. And I'm seeing leadership that has me scratching my head going, why are those guys so successful? And if you're a curious person, I think there's a lot you can learn from this. I think it's pretty fascinating.
Well, I think through the years, anybody who works in this business earns an MBA.
Yeah.
Just listening.
Yeah. Well, paying attention. You got to be paying attention.
Well, yes, you got to be paying attention. You don't necessarily have to take tests or take all the notes, but you have to pay attention, and you can get that MBA.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating, and it's this wacky business that I swear my mom still didn't understand what I did. And I had a show when I was at Anheuser-Busch in San Francisco, and my dad was out in San Francisco at the same time, so I invited him to it. And he had worked at Anheuser-Busch previously. And so this was a big sales rally. We had lasers, I had quad sound, we had pyro. I was so incredibly proud of it. We had, an original score that we worked on. It was all corporate rock and roll. And at the end of it, my dad was like, well, that was nice. Just very deadpan. And then I took him over to the Fairmont where the 1,100 beer truck drivers had gone for a lunch after the show. So, we go downstairs to the ballroom, we're in the outer lobby, then we walk in, and it's just madness. Waiters with, trays of food and beer bottles, and it's like prime rib and beer for, 1,100. And my dad's like, you did that? He could understand the big banquet, but, where I had my heart, so it's just like, well, what do you do? And I think that's probably the case for every generation, at some point.
Absolutely.
The careers didn't exist in our parents' life, and my son does software, and it's like, okay, I kind of get it, but not really.
So, moving forward, what's the next chapter for you?
I'm playing music. I'm in a cover band. I'm working with 2 singer-songwriters as their drummer whenever they decide to perform. And hopefully some travel. So, just take advantage of everything I've been given and be grateful for it, and, kind of enjoy the little things.
And isn't that the story of it all?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope I've gotten smart enough to know that, just sitting outside with a nice glass of wine with my wife, that's like everything I could ask for.
Well, let me go get a bottle of Lopo.
There you go.
In the meantime, thank you very
man.
much.
This was lovely.
It was great.
Thank you, man.